Our final section here in Chapter 5 is on how to work with package configurations. Now, if you've never played with package configurations, don't get intimidated. They are not very difficult. If you have played with package configurations, if you understand package configurations already, you're done with this chapter. You can safely go on to the next chapter, chapter 6. So really these last sections, this last 3, 4, 6, whatever it ends up being videos, is really for those of you who have never been exposed to package configurations or just would like a refresher into what they are. So what are package configurations? Well, I probably should have pulled up the documentation and read that first, but what they do, package configurations allow you to assign the value to properties and variables from an external source. So previously, everything that we have done inside the little SSIS editor here. We created the value of a variable in a script task, or we assigned the value in a script task. We hand wrote in the name of the server that we wanted our OLEDB connection manager to use, for example. But package configurations allow for extremely dynamic packages. Now, the caller of the package, so like I'll say, for example, the caller of the package can define all of the above. So they can actually set what they want to be for the properties and variables. So they can pass in the value of a variable when they call this particular package from a SQL Server job, using it from an application, from an ASP.NET web application, from a Windows Form application, from Silverlight, from whatever. The caller is now allowed not just to do the variables, but the property values as well. You see, that's something that's unique with SSIS, comparing it to DTS. In the old days, in DTS, we had really only a simple object model. You got to change the values of a variable. You could pass in the values of the variables that you wanted when you made the call, and then the package would honor that, and assuming that nobody later on had changed the value of the variable, you were cool. However, today, the package configurations, you just are exposing more to the caller. Now, the caller may be you, but it may simply be that in a job, you want it to perform a different operation. You know, classic examples of using package configuration. Let me just show you here. Actually, let me go back over to yellow. So when would I use package configs, package configurations? The classic example is you want to use one set of servers, data in development, and another when deployed to production. So you would have a package configuration file for your development, and then you would have a package configuration file for your production server. And if you were running on production, you'd load that particular configuration file, for example. That's a very, very simple way to do this. Okay, so that would be the most classic way of doing it. Other ones, you know, it kind of is, what is your imagination come down to? Like, what would you need to do this for? Different applications need to have easy ways to assign values, for example, assign variables and properties. So for example, you're using a web application that may have different values for the variables than a Windows Form application or some other type of application that you're working with. So you might want to have different configuration files for each one of those. So it allows us to make these changes to the variables and properties without changing the package. Okay, so that's a very important piece. We no longer have to deal with package development issues. Now all we have to do is change our package configuration file. You see, what you want to do, and this is really important, what you as an SSIS developer want to do is you want to be able to get to a point where your package can be reused by all of these other packages. Maybe you have a common data movement scenario, loading a text file, for example, and you just simply pass in package configurations and they change everything inside dynamically. Okay, well, let's get started here. This video, I'm just kind of trying to show you what is a package configuration and how can you create your own. So we need a package to do this with. Let me create just a simple SSIS package. And I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to make a variable, call this variable Scott's variable, breaking every single rule in the variable naming convention. And I'm going to give it a value set in variables window. So double click on it and it will expand. So you can see that the actual value is preset here. And this is no surprise to you. We've done this whole chapter. I'll grab a script task, read the variable into here, and I should have choose VB, so I'll choose VB the next time. So then I just say system.windows.forms.messagebox.show DTS.variables, and I'm in C#, so I keep forgetting to use my indexer, so I named it Scott's variable, I think, and .val u.toString, and if this seemed a little fast, or if you're not familiar with this syntax, I'd suggest you go back to watching the video at the beginning of this chapter that talks about how to create little pop-up boxes just to kind of help you during your development. And if we run this natively, it's just going to report the value that we set in the variables window, right? Nothing fancy. Okay, now let's let package configurations into the party. Under the SSIS menu up here is our package configurations. So I go choose that and I enable the package configurations. So here's the way this, no, I'm going to hold off. I'm just going to say add and I say next. And you have a lot of different ways to work with this. So I'll show you all of these, don't worry, or at least most of them. I won't show you the parent package variable or the registry entry. I'll show you the environment variable, the XML, and the SQL server. So I want to specify it here. So I say C:\/ my package configuration. Okay. And generally speaking, this would actually go in, and I'm actually going to take it out of here. This would go into your project folder, so you see it being listed up here in the project folder. That's where it likely would go. You also see down here that it has a DTS config. Even though it's really just an XML file, that loads it up and kind of gives you a special idea of what this is for. So I will just name this, package, because that's the name of my package. I say save. By the way, before I do leave this section, if it is entirely possible to have package configuration files that are reusable, that can be used by multiples. So, have some thought to naming in that regard. Okay, I say next. And when we get to this screen, it's a little bit confusing. So here's what we're dealing with over here. So if you check marked everything up here, what this is going to do is export every single variable and property possible that can be changed to an XML file. You could do that, but you probably don't need to. You really only want to export those items you need to change. I'm going to show you the example. I'm just going to click the checkbox here, and that picks up every property, every variables property. You can see everything, and I can show you here Scott's variables. These are the properties. You can see data types, what they're set. Notice that over on this right, when I've selected the value for Scott's variable, that I'm not allowed to change it here. You see, it's going to create an XML file. You go change it in that file, not right here. But what I've done is I have checked every box, and I say next and give it some kind of a name. And I say close, but really what I want to do here, I can't get it to pull it up from there. I was hoping to get it. I want to actually show you what this file looks like. So you got a couple of options. Here's my DTS config file. You can open it with a text editor. You could be foolish and open it with Internet Explorer if you wanted to. I would suggest that you open with, and you go to choose your default program, and you specify the Visual Studio. Because it's just cleaner in the Visual Studio, because once it brings it in, notice it brings it in sort of as a text stream, everything on a single line, then you can just simply tell it you want to format this. So somewhere up here we've got our formatting. I know the keys. There we go. Control K, Control D. And it's just a little bit easier to work with in here. So you can see what the values are, like we're taking a look at a property. The path is the update package property. It's a Boolean data type, and it's configured at -1. Are you ever going to change that here? Probably not. We just want to change the value of Scott's variable. So here's what we have to do. We have to go find Scott's variable. And then here we get the property. What's the property we get? The description. No, I don't really want to change the description. Then I get the evaluate. No, I don't want to get the expression. The include. No, not the name. You see what a pain it is when you get too much. I'm going to close this out. I'm going to come back into my, you can edit these. I'm going to come back in over here, come back into the package level. Go to my configurations, highlight my file, and just click Edit. And I'm going to go back up to the top, and I'm unchecking. So now there are no, as I did that twice, see, there are no properties selected. I know that because of this warning down here. Now I go to the variable. I go to Scott's variable, and what property is it that I want to change? The value property. And that's the only thing I change. And now take a look. This is going to be a pretty different way. Again, I have to Control K, Control D, but it's a very, very different file. Now I know I'm looking at the value property and set in configuration 1. Okay, so configuration 1 file. So it was generated from the package. You could see a little bit of information. This is a clean file. This will perform better. Now when SSIS loads the package, it only has to check and change the value of this single property as opposed to having to go through every possible property in the package. So I'm ready to go. Change my file. And let's go ahead and run this. Remember that if it doesn't use the configuration file, it's going to use set in variables window. If it successfully uses the configuration file, then it says set in configuration 1. So we execute it, comes back, and sure enough, it picked up our configuration file information. Pretty cool, huh? I like that. Now, one final thing before we split this, you can have multiple package configuration files active. So this actually is very common when you want to have a reusable section, when you're calling multiple packages from within another package. You can set all kinds of configurations up. However, last in wins. So what I mean by that, this is actually fairly important here. So last in wins. And what I mean is that if you assign the value of a property here, and then later on another configuration file later down the list changes that same or also assigns it, the last one will be victorious. So you can see your little up arrows over here so that you can control, and down arrows, it's supposed to be. You can control the precedence of when these get ordered. They will get ordered in this, loaded rather, in this particular order. Just in case it's a little confusing, I'm going to add a new package configuration. I'm going to tell it that this one's called package 2. And I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before. I'm just going to the variable, Scott's variable, to the value, and that's all I'm doing. I save it out as configuration 2. Notice that it is second, so it will be loaded last. Let's go change the value of package 2. Control K, Control D. And I'm going to say set in configuration 2 file. Okay. So when our package runs, it has 3 options now. We can set in variables window, set in configuration 1 if it loads the first configuration file, or set in configuration 2 if it does what Scott says that it's going to do. And so we execute it, and sure enough, set in configuration 2. Okay? Because it was last in. Last in wins. Right? So you notice it was loaded last. All I have to do, if I want this one to have precedence, I simply move this one to the top so that this is the last file loaded. Run it again, and now because configuration 1 is the last file loaded, we get that.